In a single afternoon, Peter's life changes forever when he finds the last thing he ever expected. This story unfolds a powerful journey of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate resilience. What do you do when the person you love the most betrays you? Find out how Peter navigates a world of pain and finds new purpose. Welcome to RedHead Cheating, your premier YouTube channel dedicated to unveiling jaw-dropping and unbelievable tales of infidelity. We are your go-to source for the most shocking and scandalous cheating stories that will leave you both horrified and intrigued. Cheating is a painful way to end a relationship and often leaves the other partner in a dark place. By presenting these stories, we hope to alleviate the pain you're experiencing by helping you realize that you're not alone. I never thought that something as simple as a flu would lead to the day my life changed forever. That Thursday, I felt like death warmed over, barely able to keep my head up at work. By noon, my boss noticed and sent me home, telling me to rest up and avoid spreading whatever bug I'd caught. As I drove home, all I could think about was the comfort of my own bed, my wife Beth waiting with open arms, maybe even a warm bowl of chicken soup waiting for me. But as I approached the house, my gut twisted. Parked in front of our home was a truck I didn't recognize. A big, shiny truck, definitely not the kind you'd find on a quick delivery or repair job. Even through the fog of sickness, something felt off, but I brushed it aside, telling myself I was being paranoid. I parked down the street, choosing not to make a fuss. After all, I trusted Beth. We'd been together for 24 years, building a life together, side by side. The house was strangely silent when I stepped inside, the kind of silence that prickles your skin. "Beth?" I called out, my voice sounding hollow in the stillness. There was no answer. I walked further into the house, feeling an uneasy tension settling over me. Then, as I made my way down the hallway, I heard it, muffled voices coming from our bedroom, hushed but unmistakably intimate. My heart pounded in my chest, a wild, frenzied rhythm that matched the storm of emotions building inside me. Part of me wanted to turn around, to walk away without looking, but something compelled me forward. I stopped just outside our bedroom door, which was slightly ajar, a narrow crack revealing the scene within. Through that sliver of space, I saw Beth in our bed with another man, completely absorbed in each other. It felt like the world stopped spinning. Every sense in my body dulled, my mind refusing to fully register what I was seeing. I felt rooted to the spot, staring at the woman I'd shared my life with as she shared herself with someone else. Their voices, their laughter, it all seemed like a cruel distortion, an invasion of everything I thought was ours alone. Oh God, yes, just like that, Beth's voice broke through the numbness, and a sharp pain twisted in my chest. She wasn't just with him, she was enjoying every second, oblivious to the destruction her actions were causing right outside that door. I clenched my fists, feeling the urge to burst into the room, to demand answers, to scream, to shout, to make her see the agony she'd caused. But I didn't. Somehow, I managed to stay quiet, watching as the betrayal unfolded, each moment burning itself into my memory. As I stood there, a chilling realization swept over me, this was the end of everything I thought we had. But more than that, I felt an odd sense of freedom creeping into the pain. The life I thought I knew was gone, but that meant something new could begin. I could walk away from this broken marriage, free myself from the lies. I pulled out my phone, snapping a few pictures, capturing the very moment that would forever change the course of my life. It felt cold and calculating, but I knew I'd need proof, something tangible to remind me of the truth when Beth inevitably tried to twist it. Without a word, I turned and walked back down the hallway, passing through the kitchen and out the door. In the garage, I grabbed a screwdriver and punctured the tires of the man's truck. It was a petty move, maybe, but it gave me a small sense of satisfaction, a way to release even a fraction of the rage bubbling inside. I got in my car and drove, my mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts, none of them coherent. I felt my chest tighten as tears began to blur my vision, spilling down my cheeks as the weight of what I'd seen hit me full force. 24 years of marriage, shattered in an instant. The life I thought we'd built together. Just an illusion. As I drove through the streets, aimless and broken, I knew I couldn't go back. Not tonight. Not to that house, not to Beth. There was no comfort to be found there anymore, only betrayal. So, I pulled into a motel parking lot, checked in, and collapsed onto the bed, letting the sickness and heartache consume me. It was the longest night of my life, and as I lay there, I knew that the man who'd walked into that house earlier that day was gone. By morning, I was someone else. I barely slept that night in the cramped motel room. The sickness in my body was nothing compared to the ache that twisted inside me, a pain so sharp and raw that I could hardly breathe. Images of Beth and that man flashed through my mind, taunting me. Each memory felt like a new betrayal, a knife twisted deeper every time I closed my eyes. I had loved her, trusted her. How could she shatter our life like this? As the morning light seeped through the thin curtains, reality set in. I couldn't go on pretending this didn't happen or hoping it was some horrible nightmare. It was real, Beth's betrayal was real, and the life I'd known had crumbled in an instant. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling an odd combination of anger, sorrow, and something else I couldn't quite place. For the first time, I was untethered, no longer bound to the illusion of a happy marriage. But with that freedom came the terrifying uncertainty of what to do next. I turned my phone on to see missed calls and messages from Beth. Each one made my anger simmer just a little hotter. "Please, call me," one message read. "Let's talk, Peter. I'm sorry. I can explain." Explain? What could she possibly explain? There was nothing left to say that would make this right. She had destroyed everything. But I couldn't ignore her forever. So, after gathering my strength, I decided to leave the motel and confront what I needed to. First, I called my boss, telling him I needed a few days to take care of some personal issues. He didn't pry, thankfully, though I'm sure he could tell something was wrong. I needed to put my life back together piece by piece, even if it meant starting from scratch. My first call was to a lawyer. The idea of divorce was foreign, painful, but I knew it was the only way forward. I didn't want to give Beth any power to twist the narrative or talk her way back into my life. I needed an ironclad plan to protect myself and the life I had left. Next, I went to the bank, pulling out what was mine, making sure Beth couldn't access any of it. It felt surreal, going through the motions as though I were watching someone else's life unravel. I'd never thought I'd be the man quietly preparing for a clean break from his own wife. But here I was. The final step was facing Beth. When I walked into the house, it felt hollow, like a place I'd never seen before. She was there, waiting in the kitchen, her eyes red and swollen, her face drawn with guilt. As soon as she saw me, her expression softened, and she opened her mouth to speak. "Peter, we need to talk. Please, just give me a chance to explain." I stared at her, feeling nothing but the coldness inside me. "There's nothing left to explain, Beth," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I saw everything. I saw you in our bed with him." She recoiled as if I'd slapped her, and her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Peter. It was a mistake. He meant nothing to me. I don't know what came over me." I could barely look at her. "A mistake?" I echoed, the word bitter on my tongue. "The moment you let that man into our bed, you made a choice to destroy everything we had. This isn't a mistake, Beth. This is betrayal." She started to cry, her hands reaching out for me. "Please, Peter. I love you. I was just looking for something exciting, something different. I know I messed up, but please, don't leave. We can fix this. I need you." Her words washed over me, hollow and meaningless. The woman I had once cherished more than anything now seemed like a stranger, her pleas nothing more than the desperate echoes of a life I no longer wanted. I took a step back, shaking my head. "Beth, you broke us. You broke me," I said, my voice low and firm. "You don't need me, you made that clear when you brought him into our home. I'm leaving, and nothing you say will change that." She collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, her words lost in her tears. "It was just sex, Peter. It meant nothing. I love you, not him. I want you." But as I watched her crumble, all I felt was emptiness. The love I'd once held for her had vanished, replaced by a dull, aching void. I didn't feel rage anymore, or even sorrow, just a deep, unshakable numbness. Without another word, I turned away from her, grabbing a bag and packing the essentials. She called after me, begging, but her words didn't matter anymore. I was done being the man who put her happiness above everything. I was finished with the lies, the betrayal, the empty promises. As I left the house, her cries echoed in my ears, but I didn't look back. The life we built together was over, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine, and I was determined to reclaim it, one step at a time. Leaving Beth that day felt like shedding an old skin, like finally ripping off a bandage that had been suffocating me. I didn't know where to go or what to do next, but I knew I was done with the life I had with her. It was time to reclaim control, to take the first steps in rebuilding myself. I drove aimlessly, letting the silence settle over me, my thoughts heavy but strangely focused. By the time I stopped, I had a plan. I'd see a lawyer, take the necessary steps to break free, and make sure there was no way Beth could pull me back into her mess. The next day, I met with a lawyer, a calm, seasoned woman named Claire who listened without judgment as I explained everything: the years of loyalty, the shock of betrayal, the painful reality that it was all over. Claire's expression was sympathetic but professional as she laid out my options. "You're making the right choice," she said after a pause. "I've seen a lot of cases, Peter, and I can tell you that what you're doing is about self-preservation. This is about reclaiming your life." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of grief and relief. I'd spent 24 years thinking of Beth as my partner, my other half. Letting go of that illusion was like losing a part of myself, but I knew Claire was right. This was survival, pure and simple. Over the next few hours, we went through all the necessary steps, filing the paperwork, setting up temporary separation terms, and ensuring that my finances were protected. It felt cold and mechanical, like I was watching someone else handle it all. But each document I signed, each account I closed, felt like another chain being cut loose. After the meeting, I withdrew my savings from the bank and set up a new account, one Beth couldn't touch. It was another move that felt ruthless, even cruel, but I reminded myself that she hadn't thought twice about betraying me. This wasn't cruelty, it was caution. When I finally returned to the house, Beth was waiting, sitting on the couch with red-rimmed eyes, her face pale and haunted. She looked up as I entered, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of hope in her gaze. But I wasn't the same man who'd walked out that door the night before. I'd made my decision, and nothing she could say would change that. "Peter," she began, her voice quivering, "please, just listen to me. We can fix this. I'll do anything, I'll go to counseling, I'll quit my job, whatever you want. Just, please, don't leave me." I stared at her, feeling a mix of pity and bitterness. She was clinging to the life we'd built together, but it was clear she hadn't truly valued it. If she had, she wouldn't have let another man into our bed. There was nothing left to say, no words that could fix the damage. "I already told you, Beth," I replied, my tone flat and unyielding. "There's nothing to fix. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." Her face crumpled as she looked at me, desperation flooding her expression. "It was a mistake, Peter. Just one stupid mistake. He didn't mean anything. I don't want him, I want you. Maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to find excitement with him in our bed," I said, my voice cold. You didn't just make a mistake, Beth. You betrayed us. You threw away 24 years of trust for something meaningless. Her hands flew to her mouth as she choked back a sob, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But I remembered that look on her face, the joy she shared with that stranger, and any lingering sympathy vanished. I couldn't be the man who forgave and forgot, not after what I'd seen. Beth, I said, my voice calm but final, I'm moving out. I've already spoken to a lawyer. This is over. She fell silent, her eyes wide with shock as the finality of my words sank in. Please, Peter, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Don't leave me. I know I messed up, but I love you. I don't know why I did it. I was so stupid. Please give me another chance. I sighed, feeling exhaustion settle into my bones. I loved you, Beth. But that's gone. I don't trust you anymore, and without trust, there's nothing left to build on. She reached out, but I stepped back, avoiding her touch. You wanted freedom? Excitement? I asked, my voice edged with bitterness. Well, you've got it. Enjoy it. With that, I turned and walked out, her sobs echoing faintly behind me as I left. I didn't look back. There was no point in lingering over what was already broken. As I got into my car and drove away, a strange calm settled over me. I didn't know where I was headed, but I knew it was away from Beth, away from the life we'd shared. The pain was still there, but alongside it, I felt a glimmer of something new, a sense of freedom, of possibility. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I was in control. I was done with lies, done with betrayal, done with living for someone who didn't truly care for me. It was time to start over, time to face the truth and build something new from the ashes of what had once been. As I left the neighborhood for good, I knew there was no turning back. Leaving Beth felt like tearing away from an old life, one I'd built with hope and trust, only to watch it crumble under the weight of her betrayal. My heart felt hollow, bruised by the knowledge that she'd thrown away what we had, and I knew I couldn't go back. But as much as I wanted to escape the pain, I also knew that true freedom would mean facing her one last time, putting everything to rest. I returned to the house the next morning to collect my belongings. Beth was waiting, standing by the front door with that same pleading expression, like she was hoping that somehow, things could still go back to the way they were. I looked past her, barely acknowledging her presence, my mind set on gathering the pieces of my life and moving on. She followed me as I moved through each room, packing the essentials and anything that still felt like mine. Every picture, every keepsake I'd once cherished now felt tainted, like remnants of a life that had dissolved the moment I saw her with him. Beth watched silently, her eyes following my every move, but she stayed quiet, perhaps sensing that no amount of begging would change what I'd decided. Finally, as I finished packing, she spoke, her voice soft and filled with desperation. Peter, please, can't we talk about this? I know I made a mistake, a terrible one, but doesn't what we've built mean anything to you? I paused, looking at her with a mixture of sadness and exhaustion. Beth, the life we had meant everything to me. I gave you everything I had, everything I was, and you threw it away. What we built only meant something until you let him into our bed. Her face crumpled, and she took a shaky breath. I was stupid, Peter. I don't know why I did it. I guess I was looking for excitement, something different. But I didn't mean to hurt you, I swear, I didn't. Looking for excitement? I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. Was it worth it, Beth? Was a moment of excitement worth 24 years of marriage? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, it wasn't. I realize that now. But please, we can start over. We can rebuild this. If you just give me a chance, I'll prove to you that I'm still the woman you loved. But the truth was, that woman was gone, replaced by someone who'd carelessly shattered our bond for the thrill of a stranger's touch. I felt no anger as I looked at her, only a weary emptiness. Whatever love I'd once had was buried beneath the wreckage of her betrayal. "I'm done, Beth," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "There's nothing left to rebuild. You destroyed any love I had for you when you made that choice." She fell to her knees, sobbing openly, reaching out to me. "Please, Peter, please, don't leave me. I don't want him, I want you. I know I messed up, but I can be better. Just don't walk away." I felt a pang of pity, watching her crumple in tears, but I knew it was too late. I'd already given her everything I had to give, and it hadn't been enough to keep her faithful. There was no going back now. "I don't need you, Beth," I said, my voice colder than I expected. "Not anymore. I need someone who would never betray me, who would never turn our marriage into a lie." Her face fell, and I could see the last shred of hope slip away as my words sank in. She collapsed into herself, her sobs filling the silence, but I didn't waver. The love we'd shared, the life we'd built, it was all gone. I picked up my bags and headed to the door, her voice trailing behind me, pleading, broken. "Peter, please. I'm begging you." But I kept walking, not looking back. I left the house, left her sobbing in the doorway, and didn't turn around. As I closed the door, it felt like sealing off a part of my life, a part that had died the moment I'd seen her with him. Walking out of that house for the last time, I felt a strange relief mingling with the sadness. The weight of betrayal was still there, but for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. Beth's pleas faded in my mind, replaced by the quiet certainty that I was finally free. This was my final goodbye, not just to her but to the life I'd thought we shared. And as I drove away, the emptiness inside began to feel less like loss and more like a blank canvas, a space where something new could finally take root. In the weeks that followed, I began the process of rebuilding, though some days it felt more like survival than anything else. Leaving Beth had taken everything out of me, but I was determined to start fresh, to find myself in the quiet of this newfound independence. I moved into a small, modest motel on the other side of town, far from any reminders of the life I'd left behind. It wasn't home, but it was mine, just a temporary space where I could gather my thoughts and plan for the future. The first step in reclaiming my life was filing for divorce. My lawyer, Claire, worked efficiently, guiding me through each painful step with a kind of calm professionalism I desperately needed. Sitting in her office, signing away the life Beth and I had built, felt surreal. Each signature was like closing a door to another part of my past, parts that were both painful and familiar. But with each document signed, I felt a little weight lift, like I was slowly breaking free from the chains that had once bound me to her. I threw myself into the process, determined to reclaim control over my own life. I organized my finances, closed shared accounts, and cut off every connection that tied me to Beth. It was a slow, exhausting process, but it felt necessary, like dismantling a structure that had rotted from within. Each step, no matter how small, felt like progress, a reminder that I was moving forward, even if I wasn't sure what direction I was headed. One of the hardest decisions came when I realized I needed to leave my job. I couldn't bear the thought of returning to the same routine, surrounded by people who knew me as Beth's husband, who'd seen us together at office functions and holiday parties. The idea of facing their pity, of explaining what had happened, was too much. So, I resigned. It was a leap into the unknown, but it felt like the only choice that made sense. I needed a clean slate, and that meant leaving behind everything, even the parts of my life I'd once been proud of. The first few days without any obligations were both freeing and terrifying. For the first time in years, I had no responsibilities, no commitments. There was no one waiting for me, no deadlines, no job to fill my days. I'd wake up in that quiet motel room, the silence pressing in, and wonder what to do with myself. I would go on long walks, aimless and reflective, just to escape the four walls that felt increasingly claustrophobic. Each step, each day alone, was a reminder of the life I was now living, a life without her. But as the days turned into weeks, the ache started to ease, replaced by a strange sense of peace. The weight of betrayal still lingered, but it felt less sharp, more like a distant memory. I started to savor the quiet moments, enjoying a coffee without rushing, taking drives through open fields with no destination in mind, and feeling the freedom of having nothing to answer to but myself. Slowly, I began to see this time as a second chance. A chance to rebuild, to figure out who I was apart from the life I'd shared with Beth. For so long, I'd been wrapped up in the routines of marriage, in the compromises and sacrifices, that I'd forgotten what it was like to live for myself. Now, I had a blank slate, an open road, and no one to tell me where to go. Eventually, I started to pick up hobbies I'd forgotten I loved. I'd always enjoyed photography, so I bought a cheap camera and started taking photos on my walks. I found solace in the way the lens allowed me to see things anew, to find beauty in details I'd once overlooked. It was a small joy, but it was mine, something no one could take away. There were nights when the loneliness crept in, when I felt the weight of everything I'd lost. But each time, I reminded myself that leaving Beth was necessary, that this pain was part of the healing process. I was building something new, piece by piece, and though I didn't know where it would lead, I knew I could face it on my own terms. The man I'd been was gone, but with each passing day, I felt a little closer to the man I wanted to become. And for the first time, I felt the quiet promise of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, this broken life could be rebuilt into something better than I'd ever imagined. After weeks spent rebuilding my life in solitude, a surprising thing happened. I met someone. Her name was Maeve, a woman with an easy smile and a calm strength that was magnetic. I'd met her through a mutual friend who thought we'd get along, and to my surprise, they were right. Maeve and I clicked in a way I hadn't felt in years, a way that was both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. I hadn't expected to find anyone new, let alone someone who seemed to understand my past without me even having to explain. Maeve had her own story, her own scars from a painful relationship that had fallen apart. She understood the betrayal, the loneliness, and the slow process of moving forward without looking back. In a way, we were two people brought together by shared heartache, both of us working to rebuild, to find peace and hope in the aftermath of broken trust. And somehow, that shared pain created an immediate bond, a foundation we could both lean on without fear of judgment or pity. Our first conversations were tentative, each of us careful not to pry too deeply. But over time, we began to open up, to share the details of our lives. She'd listen intently when I told her about Beth and the fallout of our marriage, her expression softening in empathy, never interrupting, just letting me get it out. In return, I learned about her past, her own experiences with betrayal, her struggle to trust again. It felt like a healing process for both of us, a way to finally lay our pasts to rest. What surprised me most was how natural things felt with Maeve. There was no pressure, no need to prove anything. It was just two people finding comfort in each other's presence, rediscovering laughter and joy in a way that felt both unfamiliar and deeply necessary. Maeve's warmth, her compassion, her gentle honesty, each quality reminded me that not everyone would break my trust. There were people out there who could be genuine, who could love without conditions. Over the weeks, our friendship grew into something more, something I hadn't thought I was ready for. But each time we'd talk, each walk we took together, I felt a sense of ease, a peace I hadn't known was possible. Maeve helped me see that Beth's betrayal wasn't the end of my story, but rather a painful chapter that led me here, to someone who truly valued me. One evening, as we sat watching the sunset from a hilltop, Maeve turned to me, her eyes filled with that same mix of pain and hope I recognized from my own reflection. "Peter," she said softly, "I know we've both been hurt, but I think we were meant to find each other. I don't believe in fate, but I believe in second chances." Her words settled over me like a gentle weight, filling me with an emotion I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. Hope. Real, genuine hope, the kind that comes from understanding that broken things can be mended, that life can surprise you with beauty even after it's shown you its darkest sides. I reached for her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin against mine, and I knew she was right. This was my second chance, a new beginning I never thought I'd get. With Maeve, I felt like I could finally let go of the pain that had weighed me down, let go of the betrayal and mistrust. Here, with her by my side, I could see a future that wasn't defined by the mistakes of my past. Beth's betrayal had broken me, but in a strange way, it had also set me free. I had been forced to confront the life I thought I wanted, only to realize that the path forward was better, richer, filled with possibilities I hadn't dared to imagine. Maeve was my proof that life could change, that I could rebuild with someone who understood my scars and accepted me as I was. As we watched the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. This was where I was meant to be, beside a woman who valued honesty, loyalty, and love. With Maeve, I could finally let go of my old life and embrace the one I was building anew. For the first time in years, I felt free. Truly free, and ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing I wasn't alone. Maeve was my second chance, and together, we'd face the future, hand in hand, with no more secrets or shadows to haunt us. Life with Maeve became my new normal, a life that felt richer and more authentic than anything I'd experienced before. Together, we built a foundation of trust, both of us careful but open, rebuilding our lives side by side. Maeve was a gentle but steady presence, and I found myself becoming someone I barely recognized, a version of me who could smile easily, who could look forward without lingering on the past. With her, there was no pretense, no need to keep up appearances. It was just us, honest and unguarded. A year passed, filled with moments that showed me how real love felt, how deeply two people could understand each other without words. We spent time exploring our interests, taking long drives with no destination in mind, and talking about everything and nothing. Maeve showed me that healing wasn't a single event but a journey, and with her support, I found the courage to forgive, not just Beth, but myself for the years I'd spent trying to keep a broken marriage intact. One weekend, Maeve and I went hiking in the mountains, a quiet, serene place that felt like a world away from the chaos of our pasts. We reached the summit, looking out over the valleys stretching beneath us, and I felt the weight of everything lift, like I was finally standing at the edge of a new chapter. Maeve slipped her hand into mine, her smile soft as she looked out at the view. "Thank you," I said, the words catching in my throat. "For being here, for believing in me, for being part of this new life." She looked at me, her gaze steady and warm. "Peter, we're both here because we took the hardest steps. We walked away from what was hurting us. And now, we get to write a new story." Standing on that mountaintop, I knew she was right. Our lives had been torn apart by betrayal and loss, but it was those very scars that had brought us together, that had helped us find strength in each other. I realized that Maeve wasn't just a new beginning, she was my partner, someone who understood the fragility of trust and respected the effort it took to rebuild. We stood there in silence, hand in hand, both of us aware of the journey that lay behind us and the one that stretched ahead. Beth's betrayal, as painful as it had been, had ultimately set me free, leading me to a love that was honest and whole. And as we left the summit, I knew that whatever came next, Maeve and I would face it together. It was a new beginning, one filled with peace, laughter, and a love I never thought I'd find again. Finally, I felt like I'd found where I truly belonged.